Organizational change management as we know it is dead. We've been doing it wrong all along, and we need to find a new way of addressing the human aspect of digital transformation in ERP implementations. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting Group. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformation journeys. And I actually started my career 20-some years ago as a organizational change consultant on big ERP projects at big Fortune 500 companies. So it pains me to present a video that suggests that organizational change management is dead. But I want to talk here today about what it is that's wrong with most organizational change management programs and strategies, and what we can do differently to make sure our digital transformation succeed in the coming years. So when most people think about organizational change management, and this includes ERP consultants, software vendors, system integrators, most of them think about training and communications, things that are focused on a transactional aspect of the software. How do I type whatever I need to type into the system? How do I find the field I need? How do I do something in the system to make sure that the process works? And the problem with that approach is two things. One is it's focused on a very transactional aspect of change, which is important, but the more important thing is the more strategic aspect of change, and we'll get to that here in a second. The second problem is that by the time we get to training and communications, it's too late. That stuff is mostly downstream after we have something to communicate and something to train people on. By then, people have already formed their resistance to change or their confusion or whatever the problems are earlier in the transformation cycle. So by the time we start communicating aspects of the changes and doing the training, that's not enough, and it's too late at that point. So we really have to look at what can we do differently to affect the change earlier in the process and ensure that we are proactively addressing some of the resistance that happens from change. So we were working with one of our larger clients recently, and this is a very large, very successful client, very well-known company that is very disruptive and innovative in their industry. And their industry is an industry that's not known for innovation or disruption. And back in the 80s, they completely turned the industry on its head with an entirely new business model, commodity-based types of products. And we're working with them through a large digital transformation right now. They're a few years into a massive multi-year implementation. And one of the things we're helping them with is organizational change management. And the client here in this case shared with us how they don't like the term change management. They don't like the concept of change management. They, on one hand, understand the need to manage the human aspects of change, and they know that they need to change, but they don't like the concept of formalized organizational change management as a program. So one of the things I learned from this client, and it's a common pattern we see with a lot of different clients, is that people in general resist organizational change management when it's a standalone team or a standalone activity that's focused on change. So one of the things we recommend to our clients is to find a way to bake organizational change into more of the core DNA of what the project team does. So for example, instead of having an entire team where all they're doing is organizational change management, it can be very effective to instead diffuse that organizational change responsibility to other parts of the team, and more importantly, business users and stakeholders that maybe aren't part of the project team, but they're the people that are going to own these changes and these new business processes and new job designs and roles and responsibilities going forward. So if we can get them to own the organizational change and do that not under the guise of organizational change management as a separate program, but just part of what they do and the DNA of what they do, that can be a lot more effective than what we've seen in traditional organizational change management approaches. So the question becomes, how do we make it part of our DNA, and what exactly does that mean? And one of the things that we found to be very successful with a lot of clients is to, behind the scenes, craft the organizational change strategy based on the unique needs of the organization and the unique culture of the organization, and provide the change templates and methods and tools, but have the business owners, the stakeholders, mid-level management executives, different components or different people within the organization that aren't necessarily part of the transformation project team, have them own the change and deliver the change and be the face of change, and also be the voice of the front lines so that we can also not just share changes and have them push communications and changes out to the organization, but also get a pulse on what's happening as the changes are happening on the front line. So if people are freaking out because it's too much change or they don't understand the change or whatever it might be, we have ways to capture that input along the way. And this can be a very effective way to ensure that we have more people owning change rather than just a small concentrated group of change professionals or change team members where their only job is to focus on change management. Now, the risk of doing this approach that I'm mentioning here is that oftentimes transformations are more complex than we expect. It oftentimes takes more time and money than we expect. And if we end up getting backed into a corner and end up having to cut something in order to meet our deadline or to meet our budget that we're trending to exceed, we're probably going to cut change management. It becomes very easy to let change management to fall by the wayside so that we can focus on doing the other more tangible stuff that we can see that's immediately in front of us, which usually has more to do about the technology. So we have to make sure that we have a good strategy that isn't something that's going to be attractive to cut from the overall strategy and scope of what it is we're doing during our transformation. One of the most common things that organizations overlook when going through their transformations and building their organizational change strategies and plans is the whole concept of culture. Too often, companies come in with a cookie cutter approach to change management, whether it be a pro-sci type of approach or software vendors sometimes have their own OCM light methodologies. System integrators will have their OCM light methodologies. And oftentimes there's a cookie cutter that don't take into account the culture of the organization and what it is that we're trying to become as an organization. So as an example, a lot of companies we work with are global multinational companies that are growing organically throughout the world. They're acquiring other companies. And over the years, they've grown a decentralized, siloed type of organization, and they've built enough critical mass and scale that now they want to figure out how do we pull this all together and how do we act more like a grown-up company that acts like one company. And on paper, that sounds good. In theory, it sounds good as well. But getting there is a lot more difficult, especially when people are used to operating decentralized and doing whatever they want, for lack of a better word. And now we're going to come in and tell them how they have to operate because corporate says that there's a mandate for us to operate a certain way. So in order to get there, we need to be mindful of the fact that that's a big cultural shift. And people aren't just going to jump for excitement because they see the benefits or they see that the company is going to be more profitable potentially by acting more like one company. So we have to figure out, based on that cultural shift we're doing, what is the change strategy that's going to help us get there, and what are the change management tools that can best help us get there. And then the other part of culture to be aware of is that we just need to understand and make sure that our transformation in general lines up with the culture that we're trying to affect. So a lot of times organizations, in the example I just gave around wanting to standardize operations, they will not necessarily understand the level of effort it's going to take to get there and the amount of magnitude of change and how they're going to affect that change throughout the implementation. And they also oftentimes will make decisions and operate the project in a way that's inconsistent or misaligned with that desired future state culture. So we need to make sure that our overall transformation is focused on the culture we're trying to enable. And obviously that's something that goes well beyond the capabilities of any one organizational change team or organizational change work stream on a project. That's getting back to the executive level, which is something else that organizational change management should address as well. So one of the best ways to quickly get to a change strategy and plan that makes the most sense for you is to conduct an organizational readiness assessment, which would be a combination of quantitative surveys to gather a quantitative pulse on the culture of the organization and where we anticipate some of the resistance to change or the difficulties with change might come from, and also qualitative focus groups, so really understanding and unpacking the culture and the different political nuances and internal dynamics that we need to consider so that we can create a change tool set or a change plan that focuses on who you are as an organization today, the pitfalls along the way, and where it is we're headed in terms of transforming our culture. So that's probably the biggest word of advice I could leave, is to make sure to conduct that organizational readiness assessment. And that's something that having a dedicated or a focused organizational change team can add a lot of value, is by conducting that assessment and creating the plan that goes behind that. But when it comes time to execute that plan and to push the changes through the organization, that's where we need to diffuse the organizational change activities in a more decentralized way and let the business own that and make that part of the DNA and take that Trojan horse approach that I mentioned earlier. So I hope you found this information useful. I encourage you to please like and subscribe to this channel. I also encourage you to download our annual ERP report, which I've included a link to below, and that includes tons of information and best practices around ERP projects in general, including organizational change management best practices. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.